Okay, we're back. Third video for FujiNet's config ng, which is config next generation by Mark Fisher. Goes by Fenrock. This is the third video. You may have seen some of the two earlier ones. If you haven't, you didn't miss much. Each video has been getting progressively better. I had some technical difficulties with the first. The second one had a completely crazy way of loading the alternative config app, and I'm going to correct it in this video and show you the super easy way to do it on your FujiNet, and it'll make a lot more sense. I'm also going to show you some recent developments as of even this morning with the application, because the author, Mark, has released a new version that fixes some problems with trying to use config ng while mounting some cartridges at the same time. And I'm going to do some comparisons and go a little bit more in depth to show you just directory traversing with both config ng and the standard config. So there is some new content in this video, and there's a little bit of the previous content all mixed together. Probably going to unlist the other videos. Just go forward with this one as the ultimate guide to config ng as of now. All this is really much easier now because of the new firmware, the 1.3 firmware. So I encourage you to grab that and download it. And with that said, we'll start taking a look at config next generation and how you can use it today in your Atari. Hello, I'm back with another video. This time I'm going to show you how to really set up and use config ng or next generation for the Atari FujiNet. Another interesting twist to the continuing saga for config ng and how you can use it on your Atari and FujiNet with the latest firmware, the 1.3 release. Makes it very easy to use alternative config files by simply adding them in to the SD card on the FujiNet and then specifying normal config, which anyone who uses the FujiNet Atari should be used to, allows you to set up these configurations. There are multiple ways for you to get the config ng image file loaded onto the FujiNet and use it as an alternative config application for when you boot your FujiNet. One of the other ways is by downloading it directly and putting it into the FujiNet PC, which is a version of FujiNet that runs on the PC, Mac, Unix, Linux, and allows you to use FujiNet with emulators. In this case, I'm running this now on an emulated Atari using Altera. However, if you have a real FujiNet, there is another easy way that you can download this and specify the use of it for when you boot your FujiNet, and I'll go over that way right now. So, even though I'm on emulated Atari with Altera, you can use this today with your real Atari and real FujiNet. You need to add a new host that has the config ng image file. I've created one and I have it on my server. There may be other servers where it's available. For now, if you do FujiNetDiller.org, I have it ready for you to download. We'll add that in as a host. We'll hit enter to go into the host, and in Atari folder, and in the FN lib, which stands for FujiNet Library Applications, because config ng uses it, there's a config ng. We will now use the copy function of the original config to copy this onto the SD card of the FujiNet. I'll hit C, and I'll go into my SD card, and then I will hit C again, and it will copy it down. Now, with it copied down onto the SD card, we'll be able to edit the configuration of the FujiNet to use that. If I exit back out now, go look in the SD card, we'll see there it is, config-ng.atr. So now I need to let the FujiNet know how to do this, and there is an easy way with the 1.3 firmware release to do that using the web service that your FujiNet provides. So, if you have never used this and your FujiNet is up, you can hit the C for the config screen. So the FujiNet config application has a config screen, and inside of there you can see the IP address that your FujiNet has. In this case, again, because it's emulated, it doesn't have one, but you would normally see an IP address that should be on your local area network that you have from your DHCP server. Use that IP address to open up a web browser on a modern PC, and you will have the FujiNet web page, which looks like this. Now, on this, you have a number of elements that let you control the FujiNet directly from the PC. You can see things about what version it is, the network. You can see the host list, which corresponds directly to the host list already that we saw in config. You see the mount list, which shows all of the devices, disks that were previously mounted. There's settings for modem, settings for printer, high speed settings, time, UDP, cassette tape, CPM, PC link, serial port, emulator. All these things are different aspects that you can see. There's a number of videos already on YouTube that goes over a lot of these. The things that we're interested in is all the way at the bottom, the boot settings. And there's a new option in 1.3 right here called Set Alternative Config Boot Disk. If I hover over there, it may be too small to see, but basically I just need to put the name of the file that I have on my SD card and it will boot. And we know that is config ng.atr. I will click save, and it brings me back. It should be saved. And now if we go back to the FujiNet, we should see, I'll go back here and I will reset the system. All right, there you go. So there was another very easy way to pull down the config ng image, put it on your own FujiNet, and configure it to boot and play with it. Going back to the original config is just as easy as opening up that web page again and changing this back. It says set to $ for default config disk. It was empty before. I'll try $ and see what that actually does. I haven't tried that before. And then again, if we go back to the Atari and I do reset, and we can see the original config is loading. So there you go. There's been some new developments in config ng and some advancements made with people testing it out and trying to use config ng, I hope because of some of my previous videos, which this is improving upon. There's been some work very recently by Fenrock, and he's got a new version out that he hopes to be able to work with inserted cartridges, fixing some memory segments, and as a new surprise, he's gone in and added a new image loader so you can see it load. So with that said, I'm going to jump in and show you again just how easy it is to use this configuration by setting up downloading different versions of the config ng or any other config or any other thing you want to autoload in FujiNet, and how with the 1.3 version of the firmware you can easily edit that right on the FujiNet's web page and boot into it on your FujiNet without doing anything else. So let's get started and take a look at that. Here is the FujiNet that we are all familiar with, running the config that comes with every FujiNet. There was just a new version of config ng that popped up, and I'd like to take a look at it. I've never seen it before. It just came out this morning, so I'm going to show you how to go grab it and stick it on here, and we'll take a look at it together. So see right there, config ng logo. I want to put that on my SD card. I don't want to load it. Okay, I'm going to speed this part of the video up because we've already looked at it previously. Going through, grabbing the new version of config.ng, popping it into my SD card. And once it's on the SD card, then I can hop over to the web config and configure it to load that up. So we just saw that in the previous section. What this is like I said, this version was just released this morning, so it's going to be interesting to take a look at it. It fixes a couple of bugs that was just discovered that would stop config.ng working if you also tried to load some carts at a time, say like a Mac 65 or an Action cartridge. They were stomping on each other in the memory. That should be resolved, and we'll take a look right now and see how it functions. In just a moment, we should see the new logo for config.ng. Yep, and there it is. I did a little freeze frame. That is the new logo that just got added this morning. Gives it a nice little touch as it's loading up on your Atari. Here is the config.ng, which we are, hopefully by now you have taken a look at this and you know and love. Okay, now we're going to take a look at just some examples of directory traversal comparing the original config and config.ng. So you see I've got some picture-in-picture here. The original config is the blue background and the config.ng is the smaller image. And what I did is I went over to FujiNet Atari 8bit.net and did a little recording of just traversing some large directories to give you a sense of what you're going to see between them. You get a couple extra rows in config.ng because the screen is a little bit larger. It doesn't show the commands there as double lines. And so you can see that. And I basically just went through a couple different directories that I know had a lot of entries in them, as you can see here. To give you a sense of what you get between them. There's not a huge bit of difference. In fact, the speed is almost exactly the same between them. Of course, that's very dependent on your network because it is going out to the network for each one of these and bringing them back. But you do have more vertical and horizontal resolution. And here I've gone into the Atari directory on both of those and timed it up pretty directly to give you a good sense of what you got. So hopefully this can also give you just a sense of the difference in what things look like when you're using config.ng. Okay, the following portion of the video is what was done previously in config.ng reloaded, and that is when, like it says here, a slightly bizarre way, I decided to show how to grab the config.ng file and pull it down using a browser onto your desktop PC and then copying it over and then updating it via the web page. None of that is valid if you have a real FujiNet. It works if you have a emulated Atari and you're using FujiNet PC. However, what I showed earlier in the video of using config itself to pull it down to your SD card works in all scenarios and is a much more reasonable way to do it.
And I didn't really go into the details of how you actually swap out and
just
use
in case somebody would enjoy
on the
it.
FujiNet. I just showed you what it did. This video, I'm taking a step back. I reset up things, should have good screen capture, and I'm going to show you really quickly how easy it is to set this up, grab it, and start using it on your FujiNet if you want. Now, I am using Altera and a virtual Atari with FujiNet PC running on a Windows machine, actually running on the WSL, but the directions will be almost exactly the same for a real FujiNet. The only difference is where you actually put the new ATR that has the config.ng. On a real FujiNet, you put it inside on the SD card because that's the space that you have. On this one, I'm going to put it just in a directory on my PC. But we'll go through. So we're booted, and here you can see the regular config for Atari that you're used to. You've got host lists, and I've got drive slots, and I've got something on there now. I'll eject that just so we're exactly the way we are and you would expect it. And, you know, Anyone who's used FujiNet for Atari will understand what this is. You have 8 different hosts that you can go into, and you have 8 different drive slots for the Atari. And I can go into any host and navigate to them and find an ATR that I want. I will go back and use weather. I can pick which drive it is on the Atari. The Atari only boots from drive 1, so it's going in there. And if I come back, I can see there it's mounted, and boot this Atari, and it's going to boot, and we'll have a weather program. So anyone that's used it is very familiar. So config ng is an alternative config program for the Atari only. It's written in assembly by Mark Fisher, who goes by Fenrock on the Discord. He's done it about almost a year now and spent a lot of time on it, and it's quite interesting and worth taking a look. And it's real easy to swap it in and use it without too much disruption. Because of the new 1.3 firmware release, there is a new option in the fnconfig.ini file that lets you easily point to a different load file, a different config file, which is what the FujiNet boots when it first starts. And I'm going to show you how easy that is. So there we go. There's our regular Atari. We're going to leave it behind while I go and grab it. So the first thing is you need to get the file. And to do that, we're going to jump over here and look at this web browser. And in it, I have that is the FujiNet server there. That's web browser. I have a link over to my tnfs server, and I have a sample fn config file, which we'll take a look at a little bit later. I'll give you a quick preview. You can see right there's the alt config file. So first of all, we need to get the new ATR if you don't feel like building it yourself. To do that, I've made it available on my website at fujinetdealer.org. So you can go there inside the Atari directory, and in FujiNet lib is the ATR. I'm going to click on it to download it here to this machine. And now, when I jump over here, we need to copy it into the right place. So if I go to downloads, I should just see it. Okay, so I've copied it down from the web server. I need to move it to the right place. To do that on Windows, it's just easy enough to use the copy and paste commands. I'm going to go back into my FujiNet PC directory. This is where it differs between a real FujiNet, obviously, and the FujiNet PC. You'll just be copying it onto your SD card. You could do that directly from the real config. For my usage, I need to go in here into the build directory and dist, and I'm going to put it on the SD card. That's where it expects the fake SD card. So I'm going to paste it in there, and there's the config ng ATR. So now that's done, but I still need to update the INI file, because if I restart the FujiNet now, it's still going to go back and boot the regular config. To do that, we'll jump over to an editor, and I will open the fn config file. So here you can see it. This is what the FujiNet uses when it boots up, and you can have one of these on your SD card, which it will try to read if it finds one on the SD card. If it doesn't find one on the SD card, then it goes inside of its internal SPIF RAM and loads that. So you want to create a new fn config INI file on your SD card, and you can do that by downloading a sample one from the website. I'll put a link to where you can get that and copy and paste it and edit it with an editor. You can see right here I have not config enabled, but alt config file. It's right there, and it's just as simple as typing in the name of that, and that is config ng ATR. I will save it. And now that's done. And now when we see, if we go back to the Atari and reset it, it should boot. Okay, and now it is booting config ng and not the regular config, because I can see it's a blue screen and not the gray screen that we'd expect with compressed loader on FujiNet. And there it is. This is config ng, written by Fenrock, and does the same type of work that we need done with the regular config, but it does it in a cool, slightly different fashion with a little bit different screens, and it's very snappy since it uses assembly. So in it we have a host list, which we're used to. We can edit that host list, can put in a new host. I'll add mine, just like you'd expect. You can go into that host and traverse it just like you can on the other one. And we will go in and grab something. You can see right away it's got a slightly different font, slightly different look, slightly different kind of highlight there. I'll grab the browser, the Contiki browser. That's fun to look at, and we looked at it last time too. Grabbing that, we can see that not only this load, but it actually has read the existing fnconfig.ini file that I had used with my previous config, right, and had weather already mounted as drive 1, and it respected that and loaded it right up. But I'm going to mount Contiki on top of that. And if we jump back, we'll see, I see the host, but I don't see where my drives are. I need to use the arrow keys left and right, because the config ng has different screens for that different info, so it can show you more in one screen. So hit the right arrow, and there are my drive slots. I can see right there. There's the browser that I just loaded. If I go to the right, there's the Wi-Fi screen. In this case, it doesn't show me any real information because I'm using FujiNet PC, which uses the host networking component. And as you can see here, it just has some dummy information. If it was a real FujiNet, I would see the IP address that the FujiNet has on my local network. And one more gives me info, and there is a little info screen. You can see Fenrock did this, and 9.2 is his version number. And I can tap left or right, and you can see it's quite responsive, quite quick. You can also copy files. Let's see. If I go in here, and I go into Atari, and I will copy a DOS disk. I find what I want. I hit copy, and now the kind of cursor or the highlight bar has turned purple, and you can see at the top I'm in the copy mode. So now I can pop back out and say go to the SD, and I hit C again, and there it is. It's copying it. Just copied it. So that's kind of cool. I'll get back out of that. Look, see if I got my browser, and we'll go ahead and same thing. Hold down Option key, and you can see that it's off and booting. So config ng, yeah, it's pretty cool. It gives you a little bit different look when you're using the Atari. It's only available for the Atari right now, but who knows? Perhaps Mark will get inspired and pick up some assembly on some other platforms and port that over. Meanwhile, we've got the Contiki browser, and there's been some demos about that, but you can see that using FrogFind or FujiNet.online also has a FrogFind. You can jump and get some queries, and it'll basically load up other websites and strip out all of the nasty new stuff like JavaScript and make it readable by the Contiki browser. Okay, so there we go. That is config ng, and when I hit reset, we'll see that it's still there. One last thing we'll look at, I did this in the other video too, and it's too cool not to, is YAIL. YAIL is over here on FujiNet Online in the FujiNet apps directory. It's yet another image loader by Brad on the Discord. He's been active and designed this really cool system. It has a back end and front end component. And it basically is going to take a search query parameter and find images based on that search query, convert it into 2 different types of Atari graphics format, and then stream it down for me and show it to me on my Atari. It's a very cool thing to set up and have running in the background. We had it at VCF East in the classroom, and it was fun. Garnered a lot of attention by people looking at it and wondering what was going on. So when you run the YAIL client on your Atari, you get YAIL. And there's a little help menu. You can quit. You can clear the screen. Set the graphics mode. It has 8 and 9. I typically use 9. 8 only looks good if you have a real CRT because it gets the artifacting. On a non-CRT, it looks pretty funky. So I'll be using graphics 9. You can save your settings if you're doing this on a real Atari. Stream is the main stream command, and this thing actually does video. Hasn't been set up yet, but if I take the time to set up a video capture camera on a Linux host and run the backend service, it can capture about a frame of video a second and send it down, which would be cool. Let me switch it into graphics 9, and I will stream some Blade Runner. It's just that easy. Type in a term. It talks to the backend server, goes off to the backend, searches a whole bunch of websites for some interesting images, rips them down into format for the Atari, streams them down to me. You can see it doing it here. Now I have the SIO bumped up a little bit so you can see that it downloads it pretty fast, and you can do this on your real Atari too. And it will sit back there and just continue to stream images to you for as long as you want to keep that up. And some of them are very cool. A very cool program. That's YAIL. You can run that today on any Atari. It's on the FujiNet Online TNFS server. So, last thing I'll do is, while this is running in the background, I'm going to jump over and show you that we can come back out and get rid of this if we want to move to the regular one. So, back here on the file, I'll get rid of the alt config file. I'm going to save this there. And now, when I restart this Atari, it should go back, and there it goes to the regular config. So the alternate config file is a super easy way to play with config.ng and any other future config files that come out for different platforms. Right now it's working on the Atari just as easy as you saw me there. So have fun, and I'll talk to you later. Goodbye.